Hello, everyone. I'm John Lasker. I'm a veterinarian from Kentucky. I deal with a lot of mastitis and mastitis management, milk quality on dairies. And today I'm going to talk to you about both milk quality as it pertains to dairies and also about parlor evaluation a little bit more specifically. I'm going to give you a lot of information. If you have any questions before the competition, I'll leave contact, email, cell phone numbers, all that stuff um, in this presentation, so you guys can reach out to me if I can help you in any way. Um, Glad to be able to be with you guys virtually, and we'll get started. So, just a little bit about our company, Todd County Animal Clinic. We work really hard, mostly on southern dairies, to help dairies become more sustainable, have better milk quality, and increase profitability. We're located in southern Kentucky and we work pretty much in the entire southeast United States. So we always say there's different forms of education where we come from. We're the kind of people, and most of our farmers are too, that, some by reading, some by observation, and others of us just have to go try the electric fence out to see what's going on. So, guess what we mean by that is you guys, you can read about it all day, you can study it with your professors and all that, but the only way to really, you know, get good at this kind of stuff is get on the farms and see how the different farmers work and how everything's going out there on the farm. So we encourage you to do that. If any students want to come work with us for a few days and see what we do, we accept students all the time. So if there's any way we can help you, we'd be glad to. So we're just going to go over the basics of mastitis prevention and best management practices. One of the biggest things to control in the southeast is fly control. I'm going to show you a lot of graphs later in the presentation about that. Detection of subclinical mastitis is huge in fresh heifer and fresh cow monitoring. Being able to analyze DHIA records and make sure that your dairies are actually on test so that you can have measurable data. Environment is huge. That, from the time that calf is born all the way through until its whole life on the farm, the environment is absolutely critical. Dry cow therapy, still a pinnacle. One of the biggest areas for improvement we see in the southeast, especially, is consistent procedure and routines in the parlor. How to detect mastitis is big. There's tons and tons of need for equipment maintenance and inspection, and we'll get into that briefly. Southeast, of course, especially if you guys are evaluating the dairy in Florida, cooling becomes huge. The effects of milk quality from heat stress are pretty unbelievable. Getting your facilities designed right, all the relationships you have with consultants and vets if you're a dairyman, and then, being able to get your cultures back and know what to do with each cow based on the culture is pretty big. So when it comes to mastitis, treatment is, very little success comes from actually treating mastitis. The number one thing based on how we prevent mastitis. That's the most critical thing we can teach a farmer is how to prevent that. So some of the common things we see that contribute to cell count, a lot of times is farmer education. That's a lot less common now thanks to all the great colleges in the U.S. And the extension services. But farmer education, some of our older farmers are still big. Way more common is procedural drift in the parlor. A lot of times the farmers know exactly what to do, but their milk harvest technician turnover is so high, or the milk harvest technicians they have will just kind of do whatever they want and get off the standard operating procedures. So it's a really big deal to really evaluate these guys, and we're going to get into specifics of that later in the actual parlor. So sometimes we see guys cut corners to save money. Sometimes there is no training. We see a lot of dairies where there's no bilingual abilities on the dairy, so that it's near impossible to train. Of course, we try to get in there when those opportunities arise and help that dairy farmer get through and get their people trained up and get them evaluated so they know. Most people in the milk harvest, actually work in the parlor, they want to do a good job. They take a lot of pride in their work and they want to do things right. A lot of times it's just a matter of us getting them trained correctly. So some of the things we can do to lower cell counts in the Southeast is an improved calf environment, working on that parlor procedure we're talking about, working on our training, teaching farmers and their staff how to detect subclinical mastitis that is not showing flakes. We'll get into specifics of that. Heat stress management is huge. It's a big opportunity. Fly control is huge. If you can get the fly control correct, can make a huge difference in the amount of Staph aureus on the farm, especially. It's heavily transmitted. A lot of studies in Georgia and University of Tennessee have shown that fly control can be critical in mastitis management. Getting our equipment right and getting our dip selection right. There's still room for improvement in the Southeast on dip selection, and we'll get into a little bit of that. So why do they matter? With the competition, it's been years since I've done it. I did one of the first ones, but having data and metrics and being able to quantify the loss to the farmer monetarily was always a big deal when we did this competition. So for each 100,000 increase in cell count a cow has, that's 5 pounds of milk production a day. Production is actually probably the biggest loss from cell count. A lot of people think premiums. In the market we're in today, there's a lot of premium erosion anyway. Very few companies are actually offering premiums. I know DFA is where we're at. Borden's does not. So if you're not a DFA dairy, there's a good chance you're already not getting premiums. So it's more about being able to sell milk and then make up some of that money from production. Very big cost mistakes are early cullings. The longer a cow's with us on the dairy, up till about 6th or 7th lactation, the more milk she produces. Of course, we talked about premium loss. Replacement costs are high. In today's dairy market, it's unique. A lot of times we can buy replacement animals, springers, cheaper, significantly cheaper than we can afford to raise heifer that we did on our own. So discard milk loss and drug loss too are effects. So looking here, this is a milk per day. And you can see, this was a study done by Zoetis, that up until 5th lactation, or 4th lactation, that cow's actually producing more milk a day. And then she curves off slowly. So if we can figure out how to help a dairy farmer increase the productive life of a cow, we can really help them save a lot of money. It also gives them more options. If you got a lot of heifers and your cull rate low and death loss is pretty low, and you're making all these heifers because your reproduction's good, and maybe you're using sex semen, well, you got a lot of options. You can trade out cows, or you can, do whatever you need to do to get a lower cell count. But, that's something you need to look at too. If you look at this dairy, you're evaluating cell count, and they're running 100,000 cell count, and you think, man, they're doing good. And then you look at their cull rate and it's 50 or 60%. And you look deeper in the data on PC Dart, and you see that a lot of that cull's from mastitis issues. They may not, they may be a falsely elevated cell count. So you got to still look at infection rates and dig a little deeper into the records to see how that farmer is maintaining a low cell count. And what you want to see, of course, is that the programs and protocols are in place in the parlor and the raising and the way those animals are handled that, are keeping that cell count low. Maybe fly control and environment's huge, and milking equipment's maintained, and that's why they've got a low cell count. One of the things you don't want to see is a super high cull rate on the data that's telling you that he's keeping his cell count low by a high turnover rate. So just something to think about when you're every dairy are healthy cows are profitable. So no matter what you're doing with their environment, milk equipment, dry cow management, heifer management, heifer rearing, whoever's raising your heifers, whatever it is, do what's best for the cows. Control your input costs. Number 3 is no management belief that, as a manager, being able to find those few key things, 2 or 3 things that a farmer can turn around whatever issues you're having. So, and this number 4 is something we really believe in our business as well as on the dairies. We don't want to change anything without establishing what victory looks like or what the effect will be measured. So, maybe if we're changing pre-dips, and we want to see if the pre-dip is going to affect the dairy positively, we might be saying, well, let's see if we're going to change pre-dip and post-dip, or we're going to change parlor routine, or we're going to change equipment. Let's give it 30 days, and next records, let's look at new infection rates. If new infection rates significantly decrease, then maybe we're looking at, this is working. If new infection rates double, then quickly that whatever management change you made didn't work to help new infection rates and mastitis. And we'll get more specifics of that in a little bit. So do what's best for the cows. So no matter what you do, if you're looking at bedding, do what's best for the cows. What's the best bedding for cows? Sand's the best bedding for cows. Fresh virgin sand. What's the most, the best way to manage dry cows? Keep them cool. Keep them coming in front of them. Do what's best for the cows. And if you miss presentation, if you do what's best for the cows, everything else will fall into place. Cows will take care of you if you take care of them. So there's 3 big areas that when we're consulting, we're looking at. And first is the human, the farmer itself, the management team, the guys in the parlor, the people feeding calves, anybody that works on the farm. We're evaluating the people. We're evaluating the environment. So look down here at this bottom left picture of these are heifers that are freshening right here. You can see immediately that there's a ton of manure on these heifers. You can also see that the udder is dirty, and that's not a very comfortable and clean environment. That heifer's at a higher risk of mastitis than maybe cows that come out of this right picture. You can see their hock and udder conformation is clean. It's a really clean parlor. So look at that. What's the environment? Where do they calve? Where do they grow up? Where are the heifers raised? How are they managed as young stock? All that stuff, all the management practices, standard operating procedures are critical. And then bottom right, we're going to actually look at the equipment in the parlor. So what does mastitis cost the farmer? And again, I'm trying to, when we do this presentation, I want to get you guys thinking monetarily as well as animal welfare. But monetarily, you need to be able to tell this farmer what a case of clinical mastitis costs. Johnson, or dated estimate, it's about $200, a little under $200 a case of clinical mastitis. So you can use that number and that breakdown to kind of show a farmer in a presentation to show him how much a case of clinical mastitis costs. So here's another way to measure. If you look at the linear score and relationships, the cell count and the different lactations, you can see the cell counts here in the linear score. And actually, the actual number, this is not who did the study. This was one of their slides from a presentation. But you can see as the cell count goes up, the milk production per day goes down for lactation animals. You can also see here the number of quarters that you can expect to be infected with mastitis in the herd. So if you're on a 200,000 cell count, you can figure that 6% of the quarters are infected, and that much is. So one of the things we say is mastitis has the first and last name. Usually, if you look far enough back, from the mastitis, you're going to find out that the human is probably not doing their job, or protocol's not been written, or the farm leadership's not as good, or for whatever reason, you're generally going to find a person at the end of whatever's causing that mastitis. So it's really important to standardize the training and do a good job on prep and cattle handling. And when you guys are looking at parlor, look at how those cows enter. Are they stressed out? Are they urinating and defecating in the parlor? Should be in a regular sized dairy, maybe one or two, less than one cow at turn should urinate or defecate in the parlor when they come in. So, you know, kind of measure that. What do the cow's feet and legs look like? How do they enter the parlor? Are they nervous? You know, you can see basically when those guys are starting to strip them and do all that or dip them, and part of their prep procedure, or the cow's kicking, or they calm. You know, how do the guys look at prep time on the, you know, so one thing you look at is prep lag, that to be over 90 seconds. So at the end of the day, just do what's best for the cow. So when you're managing people, it's one of the most important things is that they keep, the cow needs to have the same experience 3 times a day. If she's milking 3 times a day, we need to make sure she's having the exact same experience 3 times a day, no matter what crew's milking or who's in the parlor, that cow's having a very similar experience. If you walk into a parlor in this competition and you hear a lot of loud music and a lot of noises and banging and clanking, and the cows don't want to enter the parlor, then you can know that these cows are frightened or scared. And if they do that and they release adrenaline, it can mess up their milk production for 30 minutes. It's going to affect their letdown and their milk outs. And that all ultimately leads to new opportunities for mastitis. So our goals, do a better job of udder prep. It's one of the biggest things we see in the Southeast is poor udder prep. We want hands on the teats, 12 seconds. You know, and that includes wiping, stripping, all that, any kind of contact time. We want stimulation to be around 12 seconds a cow. So that's something you can measure in a competition. You look at pre-dip contact time, it really depends on the pre-dip. Iodines, I like 45 seconds. If they're going to drop down to chlorine dioxide, I like between 30 and 30 seconds in a minute. Prefer 45. So look at the prep, you know, the pre-dip time. So that you want 90 seconds from the time they strip the cow, minimum 90 seconds between strip and attachment of the unit. If you're not getting 90 seconds, there's no way that oxytocin cascade is letting milk down. So it's really important that you want at least three strips, 3 full stream strips from each teat. And this is something you can evaluate. And you want 90 seconds from the time that she is stripped until that unit is attached. And that'll make sure you get a good milk let down. This is an old program we used to use called Parlor Pro. It's something you can get on your phone on the app. I still got mine. I'm not sure if you can still download it, but you can actually measure, you know, the time in each turn, strip, dip, wipe, attach, and then unit off. And then you can measure it and then get this graph to put in your presentation. So it gives you prep lag time, kill time, first touch to attach, which I don't really look at much. And then you can see the percent of time that they do the same strip procedure for each milker. So if you're going to be in there, this is a late night shot, 2 or 3 in the morning, us working in a dairy in Kentucky. If you're going to evaluate milkers, you got to be there on every shift. You can see we've got cameras in these parlors. We're watching them, but we're also in there in person, you know, trying to help them, train them, make sure they got the support they need to succeed. We always look when we enter a parlor, one of the first things we look at is, do we have a milk procedure on the parlor? And then I want to look, if they do have milk procedure on the wall of the parlor, is it bilingual? You know, are the milkers bilingual? If they're bilingual, or, you know, is it in Spanish and is it in English? And then also, you know, it doesn't do you any good if you've got all Spanish crew and all the milk procedures in English. So, you know, looking at that, and then look and say, are the people in the parlor doing exactly what the procedure is? And I'd say over 50% of the time, you're going to find out that they're not. And if you go evaluate shift 1 and shift 2 right around shift change, it's likely that the morning shift may not be doing the exact same procedure as the evening shift. So that's a really important thing to be on the lookout for. Don't overlook the obvious. You can see here on this herd shot, there's a lot of heat stress. This is a really hot day. You know, you got a cow rudder pushed all the way up in the stall because when evaluating stalls is you want less than 5% of the stalls to have manure or urine in it. So if you go down a row of free stalls and you see manure and urine in over 5% of the stalls, then you probably got a brisket board locator problem or no brisket board. If you're in the parlor and you're wanting to do the best job you can on udder prep, and just in this over the towelettes and then on your teat plugs themselves, they're not in any kind of sanitized water or anything like that. All that can lead to new cases of mastitis. Look at feet and leg cleanliness. You look at feet and legs on entry to the parlors, you see a lot of dirty feet and legs. They're getting it from some stalls are fine and they're getting covered up manure in the crossovers. You look over this picture on the left and you got a lot of hair on the teats and a lot of udders, you know, a lot of manure on the udders. That's really going to cause a problem with new cases of mastitis. This dairy on the left is a southeastern dairy. You can look and see manure all over the automatic takeoff attachers. You see manure like that on takeoff attachers, you know those hands aren't going to be that udder. So, you know, the recommendation of the farmer may be, you know, why is there manure on these takeoffs? So they're not getting cleaned, or are they having a lot of manure in the parlor, which in this case, that was the case. And they had just a ton of manure in the parlor because the equipment wasn't right and the prep was poor. This pen right here on the right, this is another southeastern dairy, and I asked them about it, and they said this was the junkie pen. So this is where all their sick cows went for anything other than mastitis, and you can see all the manure on the feet and legs, and these cows in general condition and welfare. You can imagine what the new infection rate of mastitis was in that pen. So don't overlook the obvious. Look at everything. This dairy on the left, the regulator's way over here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 vacuum. This one on the right, there is no regulator. That dairy's milking cows without an appropriately functioning regulator. You can imagine how the parlor entry was with something like that. So we're looking at it, the actual thing, we really recommend stripping. A lot of farmers don't want to do it, but we really recommend it. We recommend 3 strips from each teat. We've seen it drop clinical mastitis rates as much as 12%. The other thing it's going to do is get that cow a good letdown. Remember, we want 12 seconds of contact time on the actual teat itself between towel wiping and stripping. Now, if you dip and then strip on a parlor procedure, one of the things you need to know is you're going to remove three quarters of the dip as soon as you strip the cow. So if we're going to be in a procedure like that, one of the things we recommend is coming back in and re-dipping that cow. The other thing is watch for manure on the cows. If you're getting a lot of manure coming into the parlor, you may want to add a dry wipe step before you dip, because if there's a lot of manure on the teats, it's going to deactivate your disinfectant. Remember, the best you can do with a disinfectant is to remove about 85% of the bacteria from the teat end. So if anything is wrong or anything's not going right there, you know, you could have a big log score increase in bacteria on the teat ends, you know, just from not going to remove about 85% of the bacteria. And that also goes back to the environment. If your environment's not good, there's only so much your parlor can do to prevent new cases of mastitis. One of the really quick things you can do on entry to a parlor is take some alcohol wipes. As soon as those people in the parlor get done wiping the cow, go in behind them with an alcohol wipe and see if there's any manure on that alcohol wipe won't lie. You wipe the ends, You see a lot of manure, your guys aren't doing a good job getting their towels, getting the teat ends clean with towels. So that's, an area you can show the farmer that new cases can be coming from. Look at the actual udder. Choose Wisconsin. But you can look, you want to be able to score hock, feet, and leg udders. The more manure, the higher the new infection rate, roughly. And you can actually, I would encourage you to look up metrics on new infection rates based on the scores is incorrect, aren't right, or the guys aren't cleaning the backs of the stalls the way they should. Then you go on an investigation. Are they getting an alley scraper that's getting manure all over? If you're in a robot, is the robot no dirty? I walk in robots all the time. There's manure all over the robots from the environment. And, the robot can only do so much to clean them. So just be thinking about where that manure is coming from. One of the really quick things we'll do when we walk in the dairy is go pull their filters. If you see a lot of manure and blood, like on this filter, you can guarantee that dairy's not doing a good job of getting clean, getting teats clean. So you go back and you evaluate it. Now you got to watch it because some of these people get smart. And if they know we're evaluating filters, they'll wash the filter out and leave them laying over there before you check them. So you need to be watching that and just go look at filters. Filters are dirty, you got a prep problem. So just good milking routine. This is from one of Dr. Johnson's slides from a conference we went to. But you can look at no teat end cleanliness. They didn't do a good job cleaning teat ends on a normal routine with no cleanliness, and then really strong teat end cleanliness. Bulk tank cultures to actually see how good they're getting clean. If you see a strep count increase and you're seeing high cold forms and strep counts on a bulk tank, then you know that your parlor prep very well may be a problem. Of course, you're thinking of cooling too, but if you can get your strep counts to drop by doing a better job prepping the parlor, that's an easy way to monitor, what's going on. So one person has a number of cows, maybe it's a 12, double 12 parlor, and they may do all 12 or they may do 6 at a time. But the first cow stripped is the first cow attached. So no matter what their routine, you want them to return to the first cow every time to do the next step in the routine. We see a lot of what we call, and this is an example. So when they walk in the stall, the first cow that's worked on, we want them coming back around if you follow your red lines and they do the next step on that first cow. So everything comes back to the first cow. And then, from stall 7 to 12 is a double 12. And so he's going to start at stall 7 and do the exact same thing in a territorial pattern. One person does the same thing on each cow. We see this a lot on dairies, sequential patterns. People get in a hurry. They want to talk. They love to talk in the parlor, communicate. And I don't blame them on a 12-hour shift. But they'll try to help each other out and they'll break pattern. What happens when you do that? Remember, you want your strip to attach, your prep lag time to be 90 seconds or more. And when they start trying to help each other in different areas, they can really mess that up. So that's something you guys need to be watching when you're evaluating the dairy. So things to look for, you walk in, look where the teat plugs are, look at the towel buckets, look at the towels, look at the milker's hands, look at the buttons, look at the actual cleanliness of the floor. How much water usage in the parlor? What's the cow entry look like? How comfortable do the cows seem in the parlor? Is the prep routine the same on each milker? Each milker, between different shifts or different groups, how they're actually doing the parlor. This is all important stuff that's written down, trained, and examined. You don't really know what's going on when it comes to procedures. So one thing in South we really recommend is zero tolerance for contagious organisms. And then identification of mastitis is key. So we're going to change gears here and look at identification of mastitis. Every fresh heifer and fresh cow, we want monitored for subclinical mastitis. So an easy way to do that, have the farmer duct tape the legs when the cow calves in, and then once a week, have somebody paddle test all those cows and see if there's any subclinical mastitis. If there is, we write down and record the quarters, pull a culture, and maybe even start treatment. Another way to keep score of subclinical mastitis is DHIA testing, looking at PC DART records, actually pulling those cows and seeing what's causing the mastitis. Is it a staph problem? Is it a fly problem? Is it something going on in the parlor? I went to a robot last week. The robot dairy said his mastitis went through the roof 2 months ago when he installed the robots. Well, I went in, looked at the robots, and pulled cultures on all the high cell count cows, and it was Staph aureus. So the whole deal was the robot didn't know to disinfect between cows. So on an 8-hour shift, there were no wash cycle occurring on the liner, so that Staph aureus can sit on a liner 7 cows after the cow that had Staph aureus is milked. So it's just infecting all of his cows with Staph aureus. So we put in the procedures, some of the stuff to get that under control and get those cows grouped, and his cell count dropped dramatically. So what we're looking at on fresh cows is actually like grape jelly. So when you're paddle testing fresh cows, you're actually looking to see if they're getting grape jelly clots. So we look at fresh heifers. We in the South, we really look at this with fly control, but we look at these Michigan State, Tennessee studies, and you can see a lot of heifers, Staph aureus colonizing that udder for all those months. And then when they freshen in, they got mastitis. So one University of Tennessee study is we actually pre-treat a lot of cows, or a lot of pre-fresh heifers. As a veterinarian, or you might want to recommend this on the farm, but we found it makes about $175 a cow net over what it costs, just because of the Staph aureus reduction. So Staph aureus grown on a hot sheet. This is what a hot sheet looks like, and you'll have this at the contest. If they culture something that's treatable, we like to identify those quarters and go ahead and get them treated and separated out. So what we recommend, if you have any Chondrops, Mycoplasma prototheca, then we recommend a fresh cow, fresh heifer culture program. Anything that comes in gets cultured, it has to be declared negative before it goes in general population. Any kind of clinical mastitis, clots or anything like that, we culture those. Any kind of high cell count that's chronic, she's infected over 2 times, then we're going to culture those. Then we monitor bulk tanks, and we have some people that will actually culture dry cows. So they'll culture the day they turn them dry. If you're fighting prototheca or something like that, that's a good way to know that when that cow freshens in 2 months later, after the dry period, that we're going to put her straight in there. Straight in a pen that's free contamination, or this milk lasts. So I'm gonna skip over this. This right here is really important when you get PC DART. You can look at current somatic cell score graphed against previous somatic cell score. Your professors can show you how to do that. We set all of ours up at linear score 4s. When you do that, your new infections are gonna be on the left, and these are little dots that all represent individual cows. So you can actually click on that and see the cow in her history. Chronic cows, these really relate to mastitis. If you get on a dairy and look at the records, and there's just a few dots in the new infection cycle, and then you get over here and the chronics are just loaded up, well, your cell count's up because of your chronics. You deal with chronics, figure out where they're coming from, be all right. These are clean cows, and these are cures. I'm very suspect on cures. I would track those cows and really watch them on records. A lot of them are cycling staph or mycoplasma cows. So be really careful of what you consider a cure based on records. Just some goals. when you're looking at PC DART records, you want new infections under 5%. I'm actually aiming for 2% on all of my dairies. Chronics, I want under 5% for sure. And you always deal with the chronic cows. A lot of dairies will say, well, my new infection rate's low. And then you look at the chronics, 25% of the herd's chronically infected. Well, if they're having cell count trouble, just doing a little colon can make a difference there. Another report, I'm not sure if you can use it, but it's been very helpful for us, is we go to the DRMS website and then log in as a consultant app and look at a 427. If you can't get this, then you should try to make some of these kind of things, or at least look at them. This would be a good reference for you in your notes, but look at new infections. So the new infection rate on this dairy is 39 cows out of 422, 10%. Now look at my chronics, they're a little over. But look here, of my 8 of my 19 fresh first lactation heifers are infected. And this is benchmarked against the purple lines, the top 20% of the herds in the United States. So when I look and see that, well, that's a huge opportunity over here that maybe I need to look at what are my fresh heifers infected with? Why are they infected? Where are they calving? What's their environment look like pre-fresh? You know, how long, you know, if it's, you know, the first test is when this is done, what's their first 30 days look like? And go in and look at the environment, where they're milked, how they're milked, look at any cultures and try to figure out, you know, that opportunity. And then if you see a new infection rate of 10%, where's it coming from? This is the second page of that 427 report. It breaks it down. Said if you can't do that, this would be something you could train before the national contest, and maybe, you know, days of milk. If you're saying long days of milk cows, you may be thinking environment or, you know, parlor infection. If you're saying short days of milk, you might be looking at dry cow environment, or, you know, what's going on in the transition or the first 30 days after fresh before she gets that test. You know, what's going on that's getting her infected. This is something I look at every day on every dairy, or, you know, every time, every month, is I'm actually looking at the trend from last year. So, you know, I don't want to compare July in the South to February in the South. So I'm looking, you know, back from October of 18, my new infection rate and heifer infection rates. And then I'm looking at management. Remember, we don't want to change anything we can't measure. This is a good way to measure and benchmark. So I can look and say, you know, in October of 18, I had 9% new infection rate. In October of 19, I had a 7%. So something I did over there, like right here, you got 30% of heifers freshened. And down here, you got 10% of heifers freshening in, and then have a high cell count first test. So stuff like that will help you determine if your management's working. This is another thing I look at. I look last year off to fresh cows, and I want to see how many cows got infected from the time they went dry to their first test and next lactation. If you're seeing a high number of cows of this, then you got some work to do. And if you see chronic cows coming all the way through, then, you know, maybe some culling needs to occur. So if your DHIA test is really going to help you find out which cows are the problem, and it gives you the ability to quickly affect your cell count. So we're still big believers in dry. Make sure if you're on the dairy while they're drying, make sure they're doing it right. They need to be clean. If they're not clean enough that you're comfortable, you know, putting an udder in your mouth or teats in your mouth, and they're not clean enough to be getting dry cow tubes. So it's really important to do a good job cleaning, alcohol. And when you put sealant in, you want to make sure it's internal teat sealant that somebody pinches off in that udder. This is an x-ray of an udder that nobody pinched off, and you can PI counts, and can also be some real problems to get milk equipment clean. So if you're seeing or evaluating dry cow on that dairy, make sure they're trained on how to appropriately do the dry cow therapy. We use a lot of treat, no treat plates. You might run into those on farm. These are great for fresh animals. If it grows on the red side, treat it. If it grows on the pink side, it's environmental, like an E. coli or Pseudomonas klebsiella, something like that. And it's probably not going to pay you much to treat it. So that's a fast way for a farm to turn cultures around if they can execute it. So looking at environment, what do you see here? You look at the udder, feet, and leg cleanliness, it's pretty rough. Listen to the cows. The cows will tell you if you listen to them. If you look around, you can usually see where any kind of cleanliness issues are coming from. So our goal in housing is to provide the most comfortable, low bacteria environment for cows to live, 24-hour availability to fresh water and good feed. Just do what's best for the cows. The cleanest thing you can bet on is fresh bedded sand. Probably the second cleanest thing is recycle sand. If they show you any sand cultures in the contest, look at organic load. If organic load's over 5%, you know that there's a lot of fecal material. Organic load's fecal material. And you know if there's a high organic load in fecal material, you know that you got some cleanliness problems in the washing process of the sand. Sand will cool you. If you look at mattress dairies, fresh bedded sand, and this is a metric to use if you're on a mattress dairy. This dairy that is referenced here from Dr. Johnson, the mattresses, they found that when they went to deep bed sand freestalls, they added 5 pounds of milk a cow per day. A lot of guys are going to tell you they can't afford to do sand, and this is the kind of metrics you can say that do. The other thing about it, sand increases laying time. You can get 2 pounds of milk per head per day for an hour increase laying. So sometimes you got to think outside the box. When you're looking at stalls, we're looking at solutions for a farmer here. This farmer told us that every time a new consultant came, they had a different recommendation, so he made his neck rails adjustable. Make them. This is old tie stall barns, and we needed more bedding. We've done this a lot, so we put a sand field where fluid can drain, and we bed in deep bed. So look at these cows and what they tell you. You got a lot of lime. Obviously, lime can chap udders. You got an alley scraper. You can see all the feet and leg cleanliness issues. It's obviously there's no fans in the barn. All the cows are in the central alley, which means it's more comfortable staying than it is to lay. That's a huge cow comfort issue. So listen to the cows. These cows are telling you exactly what's wrong. If you go in a dairy and you see free stalls stacked up like this, they get comfortable. That's not necessarily a good thing for us. That means the stalls are uncomfortable, need to be changed, but also it's creating a way for new infections and mastitis. You look at this picture, you see old sawdust, a lot of manure and water and just urine all in the back of the parlor. You can imagine that's going to be rough. If you evaluate a compost barn, if you go in the Southeast, you very well may run into a compost barn. The cows in the compost barn still need to be cooled correctly. The other thing is overcrowding in a compost barn. These cannot be overcrowded. You want 150 square feet on a Holstein and at least 100 on a Jersey. If they're overcrowding compost barns, that's going to be a problem. So another thing to look at, and this is a compost barn dairy, is when you walk in, look at the feet and leg cleanliness and the udders. It's all going to be right there. Remember that score I gave you earlier in the presentation, and go on there and score feet, leg, and udder cleanliness. If you see bad scores, you read that study, it's going to give you the data you need to put that study into monetary terms and be able to help that farmer show him what he's losing. Also, going to the manures coming. Is it an alleyway that's not get scraping? Last week I was on a robot dairy and the alley had a foot of water. They walked through a manure water to get to the parlor. And, the robots were filthy. And he's saying the robots are the problem. And you end up finding out that they're having to walk through standing manure water and splash it all over the udder before they get to the robot. And remember, the best you can do is clean 85% of the manure off or 85% of the bacteria off for the best prep procedure on earth. So the bacteria numbers are high when you hook the milking units up, then you're going to have problems. So this is the old Japanese study. When you look at the hot feet and leg cleanliness, and what they did in this old study from the 70s is they painted the legs. So they painted the legs on these cows and then measured where the paint was when they laid down. So the reason hot feet and leg cleanliness is so important is when the cow lays down, those feet are right on that udder. The more manure contamination on the udder, the more mud and manure on the udder, the more bacteria, the more mastitis. And what you can see is the first lactation animal has a smaller udder, and her cleanliness is even more important. The less clean she is, the more manure she has, the way more likely she's to get infected from the environment over the seventh lactation cow. So I left you the link here to go get that report card for feet and leg and udder hygiene. That's going to give you a good metric to use in your competition. I really encourage you to do it. So this is what it looks like. So we score them. Here's your 1, 2, 3, and 4 scores, just like on Ruge's paperwork. And you can actually look at that and get a percentage and then present that to the farmer. So the bedding types you're likely to run into, sand is probably the most common these days. We still see straw, sawdust, and in Southeast especially. So, you know, when you look, this is a study done by Dr. Johnson in Wisconsin. So I was looking at the monthly average somatic sale by bedding type, and it's actually the number of cows, the production, and the bedding type. And what you're going to see here is recycled sand and sand are often at the bottom. Now you can do a good job on mattresses, but remember I told you, you know, a deep bedded sand freestyle barn is going to give you about a 5-pound advantage over a mattress barn. So if you want to use a chart like this in your studies, that's something you could look at. So I did a little private study a few years ago. I was dealing with 3 dairies on the same recycling lane and compared it bacterial wise to straw and sawdust. And this is brand new straw coming out of a bale and sawdust that was sitting in a dry, clean barn that hadn't been used by a cow yet. You look at the coliform numbers, this sand that had already been installed and been through a lagoon wash had 90,000 coliforms per gram compared to almost 1 million in the straw. Your Klebsiella was a 10-fold increase from the straw to the recycled sand. And the same in your strep counts was 10-fold increase in strep counts in the straw versus the already used and recycled sand. If you get clean sand, these numbers are going to approach 0, and that's what you want. So sand is king. Everything else is high risk. We generally recommend 50 pounds per head per day of sand in a freestall. Make sure you guys are raking them and cleaning them good. Make sure that the sand is not black. The more black in the sand, just generally, the more manure in the sand. If you start seeing a lot of black, you may start looking for a problem, especially if you're seeing new clinicals and stuff like that. The sand is best. And then make sure your size of your stalls is appropriate and all that. It's all the stuff you need to be looking at. If you're looking at bedded packs, go in there, drop to your knees. Do your knees get dirty? Are they wet, covered in dust and manure? Then you know that there's too much moisture in it. Just looking at all that stuff, look at the environment, see if the feet and legs and hocks make sense for what you're seeing in the environment. If not, go to the crossovers and the alley scrapers and the foot baths and see if there's a reason or something in that pathway that those cows are walking through to get contaminated. Going to look at fly control briefly. Fly control is huge this study, and you can see there's a 10-fold increase in what they did on the right. All this stuff is from SQMI from a few years ago and Dr. Nickerson's work. But you can see a 10-fold increase in numbers of heifers infected with Staph aureus, or a 10-fold decrease in numbers of heifers infected with Staph aureus just from appropriate fly control. So we're going to look at equipment. You already talked about that. Are cow entry to the parlor good? The cows manure and defecate and have to be pushed by people, you know, to get in the parlor. Is there a lot of loud music, mariachi bands playing in the parlor? Is there rock music or metal? We walk in parlors all the time where those cows are scared to death to enter. You know, is there rubber on the floor of the parlor? Do the cows seem comfortable standing in the parlor? It's all stuff you can do before you ever get your stopwatch out. Look at the hock, leg, udder cleanliness in the parlor. Look at the teat ends. Look at all that and see how many times do you get a defecation or urination in the parlor per turn. If it's over 1 or 2 per turn, you got a problem. And then, you know, you can start looking at prep maintenance. Watch your fresh pen. If you're seeing big rings and blue teats like this, those heifers are getting over milk. That's from udder edema. That could be a whole other issue. Also, just look at that and see if you're seeing that, then you know you got a problem. You just got to work backwards to find it. The other reason we see that's poor prep. That's probably the number one reason. And then poor takeoff settings. If they're over milking cows severely or putting cows on manual milking, we see that a lot. Just check your liners, make sure they're lined up correctly. Each liner has a little bulb. They're actually lined up correctly. This is a robot dairy. Look at T-ends. You see rough T-ends, you know you get poor prep, over milking, or bad liner fit. So when you score T-ends, they're very rough. So if you're starting to see more than that, maybe score 20 or 30 cows and you're seeing more than that, then you know you've milking problems or liner fit problems and you can take it back. This is a program I use where I can actually teat score. That was by that Parlor Pro I was showing you. MC, National Mastitis Council, also has resources on that. They call it, I think it's the Teat Journal or the Teat Book or something like that. And they will actually have catalog pictures of all the different T-ends and possibilities you could have and run into on a dairy. And it's very, very helpful for you guys in training. So look at the National Mastitis website or contact them for that. So, you know, make sure that your guys are on a regular maintenance schedule. So one thing we do, if you're looking at over milking or if you're seeing the bad T-ends and stuff and you want to know if it's for your farm, you got bad prep or dry takeoff settings or whatever, but you know, before the cow starts kicking you, and you really should be able to evenly strip out of all 4 quarters a total of about 8 ounces of milk. And if you can't do that without them kicking and having trouble, there's a good chance that they're getting dryly milked or have poor prep or they're milking cows on manual takeoff settings. And that's, you know, the other thing is the milk evenly distributed between the 4 quarters? And if it's not evenly distributed, then you look at unit alignment and say, you know, maybe that unit's not lined up correctly. How can we get those units set and square under those cows? So if you're looking at milking durations, if you get on a dairy comp data or you get AFI data, you're looking at milking durations. If you want to know if your prep's good, you should have 25 pounds of milk produced in the first 4 minutes, and then 10 pounds for, you know, should be a half minute or less for each, the next additional 10 pounds. If you're not getting 25 pounds in the first 4 minutes the unit's on, you got bad prep, plain and simply. So you go back and look at your prep procedure. So if you get dairy comp records or AFI records, be looking at that. Look at unit fall offs in the data. If you're seeing more than 10 unit fall offs per 100 head milked, you know you got a problem there too. And I got you some reasons for that to be happening. I'm gonna skip over takeoff settings again. Metatrons, these takeoffs. If you got manure on the equipment, you got manure on the udder. That means those guys are either not doing a good job cleaning, or you know those cows are uncomfortable and making it impossible for them to clean in the parlor. Generally, number one thing goes back to prep. So make sure they're doing an appropriate job, and that goes back to what I told you about. If they're doing a good job, then you should be seeing happy cows enter the parlor. You know, if they're not happy and they don't want to enter and they're having to push them and kick them and fight them to get them in the parlor and they're kicking and manure and defecating, then you know you either got a prep problem or a cattle handling problem, maybe even a stray voltage problem, but you need to investigate that and figure out why. Look at their equipment. If their equipment looks like this, that's not good. These are pulsators that were inappropriately functioning on a very small dairy, and you can see here that all the imports were, you know, the little import lines, the air lines and vacuum lines are really beat up. Here's more equipment issues. The unit alignment on this cow, you want this to come straight under the cow, straight out and straight to the meter. You see all these loops cause a lot of vacuum fluctuation and incorrect milk outs. And that's what I was telling you. If you go in there and strip yield some cows at the national contest, you'll see If your unit alignment's bad like this is, you'll see immediately that in like uneven milk outs, your back quarters will be milked out and your front quarters got a ton of milk, or your left quarters have a lot of milk and your right quarters are dry. Other things to look at, there's a ditch there in that parlor with no grate over it. There's no rubber in the parlor, so those cows did not enter the parlor well. And you can see the feet, hock and leg cleanliness and udder cleanliness is poor. So, on that dairy, I'm immediately thinking, where's that manure coming from? So if we're going to align them right, you want to set square under the cow. We'll take rubber bands and put the pulsator hose right over the milk line, put it straight under the cow. This is an example of probably the worst dairy I ever went on. But you can see here that those cows have no grates to stand on. You can see the unit alignment's horrific. And instead of plugging, teats, this is a two-teated cow, obviously. They got the issues and problems. And this is the dairy I was telling you about that didn't have a regulator earlier. So, just tons of problems and opportunities for these guys to improve. This guy right here went out of business for a PI count issue and a plate count issue. Had 6 consultants come in before me. And when I walked to his back, I went through all the equipment, spent hours stripping equipment, doing all this, watching wash up, measuring chemicals. I went to the back of his cooling units, and everything's froze up. All the radiators are froze up. There's no way that there's any air movement through those cool cell radiators going to the bulk tanks. If he would have just cleaned his units out and filled them up with Freon, he'd still be in business to this day. But he refused to believe that was a problem. About a week before they cut him off, he decided to do something about it, and he fixed it. And the other week before he went out of business, he had great PI counts. That was the only change we made. So just going through and looking at equipment and just seeing that it's functioning properly and maintained properly. Prime example, this milk didn't cool off from 7 a.m. all the way to 2 in the afternoon during the. So you see something like that on graph, go look at the graphs on the wall. If you see something that doesn't make sense, question it. No management should never not be questioned. So if you see something that don't look right, remember it may not be right. So I'll leave you with what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. It's all matters of the heart. You'll know it when you find it. I appreciate your time, and here's all my contact info. If you need me, give me a call. Thank you.